File item 74. That's AB 1544. The clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1544 by Assembly Member Cooley and others, enacting the Political Reform Act of 1974, declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Mr. Cooley, you may open.
Good morning, colleagues. I'm pleased to present this Cooley-Jones bill here on the floor this morning. This bill relates to the topic of behested payments. Behested payments are a class of reporting which public officials are subject to. If somebody makes a campaign contribution to you above a certain threshold, you report that because there might be an opportunity for them to ingratiate themselves to you through that gift. If someone makes a gift to you above a certain threshold, you report that because there is this potential to curry favor. In the same way, in the area of behested payments, if a public official, legislator, city councilman, board of supervisor member asks a third party to maybe support their favorite charity, this too becomes something that gets reported because there is an opportunity there to sort of curry favor. This is the law of behested payments. It's understood. There's a rationale for the disclosure. It makes sense. In recent times, the FPPC, because of lack of clarity in the behesting statute, has begun to apply it so that a public official who is asked or undertakes to contact a public agency, be it local, state, or federal agency, on behalf of a constituent, for some grant or program that is a part of that unit of government's legislative governmental operations programs, that this type of appeal, which most people would think is part and parcel of being a public official, that you would undertake to advocate, can trigger, under recent letters of the FPPC, a behest reporting requirement. This is problematic because, for example, here in Sacramento County, we send large numbers of people annually to Washington, D.C. to advocate for funding for roads, Department of Justice to support law enforcement, Homeland Security for airport operations and matters. AB 1544 adjusts the behest statute so it is clear that a public official who undertakes to contact a state, local, or federal agency on behalf of their program, which is governmental or legislative, that this does not trigger a behest reporting requirement. And the underlying rationale ultimately is that these units of government have their own systems of accountability for how they make decisions, how they allocate funds, the programs they support, and the behest statute is not the tool to support those existing systems of government. So this, that's the backdrop to this bill. I view it as good for public policy generally. It clarifies the nature of our office, and it applies across the board to public officials at the city, county, or state level.
Thank you, Mr. Cooley. Mr. Jones, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Thank you for your attention. I'm honored to be a co-author on this bill this morning, AB 1544. It's a common sense reform to our behested payment reporting process. As the Assembly Ethics Co-Chair, I've looked at this issue very carefully with Assemblymember Cooley. It is our job as elected officials to communicate with government agencies at the request of our constituents, and it should therefore not trigger a behested reporting requirement. For those of you that are concerned about transparency in what we do here in the Assembly, any of our communications, as you well know, between our offices and any government agency are already public in the public arena. So this does not undo any of that reporting or any of that public transparency. It just undoes the reporting that we have to do as a behested payment. It clarifies and makes it easier to understand for our constituents what exactly we are doing regarding behested payments. I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Seeing no additional discussion on the item, Mr. Cooley, you may close if you wish.
Yeah. So, colleagues, it is a core principle of representative government that part and parcel of your office is the ability to advocate on your constituents' behalf. It is also well established that any government agency cannot expend funds for purposes unrelated to their business of that agency. To this end, existing law has a myriad of requirements, transparencies, disclosures, reporting that they are subject to in their decisions. And this bill just acknowledges that and establishes that a public official, again, whether city, county, state legislator, acting as an advocate on behalf of their constituency to a state agency is not subject to this behest reporting requirement, which has emerged most recently under some opinion letters of the FPPC. I request your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Cooley. With that, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 65, noes 1 on the urgency. Ayes 65, noes 1 on the bill. Measure passes with immediate transmittal to the Senate. That is without objection. Immediate transmittal to the Senate. Members, we are moving to file item 75. That's ACR 36. The clerk will read.
Assembly Concurrent Resolution 36 by Assemblymember Gray and others relative to the California Association of County Veteran Service Officers.
Mr. Gray, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, ACR 36 commemorates and honors the California Association of County Veteran Service Officers for over 70 years of service to California's military veterans and their families. This is an exceptionally good measure. I would respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Mr. Mathis, you are recognized.
Stand in support. Our county veteran service offices are the first stop for all our veterans filing claims with the VA. This is where it starts. These guys need all the support they can. They do an amazing job, and everybody should support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mathis. Seeing no additional discussion on the item, Mr. Gray, you may close, and would you like co-authors on the first roll?
Let's open the roll for co-authors, and I would respectfully ask for your support.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. Clerk will open the roll. Members, this is for co-authors. This is for co-authors on ACR 36. Co-authors, members, the clerk will close the roll. There are 68 co-authors added to ACR 36. Without objection, we may take a voice vote on the resolution. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. File item 76 is pass and retain. We are moving to file item 77. That's HR 30. The clerk will read.
House Resolution 30 by Assemblymember Atkins and others relative to the first female graduates of the United States Army Ranger School.
Ms. Irwin, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to ask for your support on H.R. 30, a resolution honoring the first female soldiers to graduate from the Army Ranger School. This past April, the Army opened up its Elite Ranger School to women for the first time. Captain Kristen Greist, a military platoon leader who has served a tour of duty in Afghanistan, and First Lieutenant Shay Haver, an Apache helicopter pilot, successfully completed the course in August and became the first women to graduate from the Army Ranger School. These trailblazing female soldiers have paved the way for future generations of female soldiers and set the precedent for our nation's elite combat forces to be selected from all soldiers, regardless of gender. Unfortunately, despite these barrier-breaking achievements, these female soldiers are not yet permitted to join the Army Ranger Battalion. With this resolution, we honor Captain Greist and First Lieutenant Haver, and we also call upon the Pentagon to allow them and all qualified female soldiers to serve in the Army Rangers and in other combat units of the armed forces. Members, I ask for your support on this resolution.
Thank you, Ms. Irwin. Mr. Chavez, you are recognized.
I'm going to support this bill, but I just want to take a little bit of time and discuss the implications of this. All of us are very aware of the hearings that have been going on for the past year or so in D.C. about sexual assault in the military. That's very upsetting for one who has served his career in the military. It's an issue of leadership. But when I reflect back on it, if you could imagine if we took a college soccer team of women and a college soccer team of men and put them on a ship for 6 months, what do you think would happen? You know, these are the challenges that we are putting into our military. There needs to be a lot of work in understanding what's going there, and I only bring that up because this is a political organization, and when you see those, you need to understand those are the real sorts of issues they're dealing with in their organization. That being said, as far as serving in the any element of the military, it's about meeting the standards and qualifications of the military. It's not about sexual orientation or anything else. It's about meeting the standards. As somebody once told me, because this may be a shock to you, at one time in the Marine Corps, it was considered that all officers had to be like 5'10" or 6 foot, and they moved it down to 5'6". You had to be 5'6" to be an officer. With a 2-inch waiver, you get to be 5'4". I'm actually 5'3.5", and was told that I could not be a Marine Corps officer because I didn't have the requisite ability. I remember a staff NCO telling me, Rocky, there's 3 things that every Marine is going to evaluate you on when they see you. They're going to evaluate you on your physical being. What do you look like in a uniform? They're going to evaluate you on your shooting badges because all Marines are required to shoot. And if you're an expert, they'll say you're one of them. And they're going to evaluate you on your physical fitness test because everybody has to do that regardless of women or men. And if you're a 300, the best they are, then you can do that. So I was ensured that I excelled in those. That is the same thing the women are going through today. It's down to this. If she can do it and meet the standards, damn it, let her do it. She deserves it. I'd ask for your support.
Thank you, Mr. Chavez. Mr. Mathis, you are recognized.
Members, while I served overseas for 2 years in a combat zone, I was with an Army transportation unit. Now, these units aren't traditionally combat units. These units are male and female units. Military police units today are male and female units. These aren't traditional combat units. What we have today is 2 women who have stepped forward, who have met all the requirements necessary to be with a combat unit. It is amazing. When I was overseas, these women that I served with, they were gunners. We were in combat on a daily basis, and they towed the line. Anybody, and any woman especially, who can toe the line with her peers, male and female, deserves the right to serve and deserves the right to serve in a combat role because they're already doing so today. I ask for your support on this measure, and we need to support our females in uniform. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mathis. Dr. Aikman, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise as a proud female Army veteran, and I guess my colleague from Riverside, I questioned what would happen if there was a women's soccer team and a men's soccer team on a ship. I'd guess they play a hell of a soccer game. But I just want to say that myself and every female veteran I know were so incredibly proud of the accomplishments of those 2 women who were able to succeed. All the women who attempted went a lot farther than many of us sitting in this room could have gotten. Somebody who went through a rigorous basic training, I can tell you, I thought about the whole airborne. It was not even an option for us at that time. And people talk about, men are going to want to help them. When you're on a 20-mile road march, nobody wants to carry your bag unless you've seriously hurt yourself and you need some help out. It is every person for themselves as a team. Everybody pulls their weight. And for these 2 women to have been able to graduate and to do this, to have the guts, the drive, the skills, and the heart to be an airborne ranger, then by God, they ought to be able to jump out of planes into live combat and lead soldiers in the way that they are trained to do. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Dr. Eggman. Madam Speaker, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't often rise because I think all the important comments have been made, but as someone who comes from a proud military family but who didn't serve actually myself, my brother was a Ranger and served in Vietnam. And when I saw the bravery, certainly, of these two women soldiers who are paving the way for others, I just felt compelled to speak, and I appreciate this coming forward. You know, since 2001, over 300,000 women have been deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, and approximately 150 women in uniform have been killed, including 84 who were in hostile action, and 1,000 have been wounded. I think about what it means to those in this chamber who have served and who stand up and speak passionately on patriotism and service to country. And when you think about these women who, despite odds, continue to push forward to be able to compete and to serve their country, I think it is certainly the grit, the determination, the patriotism should be an inspiration to us all. So I join my colleagues who've already so eloquently made the case as to why we need to be supportive today of this resolution. So I would ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Seeing no additional discussion on the item, Ms. Irwin, you may close if you wish.
Open the roll for co-authors.
Thank you, Ms. Irwin. Ms. Irwin is asking that the first roll be open for co-authors on the resolution. Clerk will open the roll. Members, this is for co-authors. Co-authors on H.R. 30. Co-authors adding on H.R. 30. The clerk will close the roll. There are 69 co-authors added. Without objection, we may take a voice vote on the resolution. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. File item 78, that's AJR 27. The clerk will read.
Assembly Joint Resolution 27 by Assemblymember Levine relative to the Land and Water Conservation Fund.
Mr. Levine, you may open.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. AJR 27 urges Congress to reauthorize and fully fund the Land and Water Conservation Fund. The fund is the country's premier land conservation program. Over its 50-year history, California has received more than $2 billion from this fund. It is safe to say that California would not have the wonderful hiking, biking, hunting, and fishing, wildlife habitat, and parks that it has without the fund. It has supported some of California's most iconic landscapes, Lake Tahoe, Point Reyes National Seashore, and Central Valley wetlands. There is no opposition, and it has received bipartisan support in committee. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. Would you like co-authors, Mr. Levine, on the joint resolution?
Yes.
Okay. First roll will be open for co-authors, members. Clerk will open the roll. This is for co-authors on AJR 27. This is for co-authors, members. All members wishing to add as co-authors. Clerk will close the roll. There are 41 co-authors added. An AJR requires a roll call vote. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 56. No 7. The resolution is adopted. We are going to pass temporarily on Senate third reading file item 79. File items 80 through 94. Correction, members, that's file items 80 through 89, pass and retain. We are moving to file item 90, that's SB 741. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 741 by Senator Hill and others, and act relating to communications.
Mr. Gatto, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 741 is a bill that has united both people on the right side of the aisle and the left side of the aisle because of its importance for freedom and civil liberties in this state. 741 would ensure that there is transparency when police use devices that capture people's cell phone data. Commonly known by the brand Stingray, these portable devices can find out who a person is calling, when the call is made, where the call is made from, and in some cases even listen to phone conversations. 741 preserves core civil liberties by preventing police departments from acquiring this technology unless it's approved by a city council at a public hearing. Elected sheriffs, due to the amendments, must now just notify the public when acquiring the technology. Local agencies also have to develop a privacy policy and post it on their website. This bill now has received unanimous support and has no opposition left. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Gatto. Seeing no discussion or debate on the item, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 59, no 0. Measure passes. File items 91 through 94, pass and retain. File item 95, that's SB 272 for the purpose of amendments. Clerk will read with amendments.
Senate Bill 272 with amendments by Assemblymember Mainshine.
Mr. Mainshine on the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These amendments represent an agreement between the author and the opponents to address concerns about cybersecurity. These amendments will remove the opposition to this bill, including the Police Chiefs and Sheriffs Association, CSAC, the League of Cities, the Urban Counties Caucus, and the Rural Counties Caucus. I respectfully request your aye vote on these amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Mainshine. Without objection, we may take a voice vote on the amendments. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. The bill is out to print and back on file. We are going to pass temporarily on file item 96. File items 97 through 99 passed and retained. File item 100, SB 655. The clerk will read.
Senate Bill 655 by Senator Mitchell, an act relating to housing standards.
Mr. David Chu, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. Today I present SB 655, a bill that will create clarity in the Health and Safety Code by adding mold as a substandard living condition. Indoor mold growth in living spaces, as we all know, is very common. We know that mold is one of the most common housing complaints received by tenant organizations, legal aid organizations, and code enforcement agencies across the state. Scientific evidence on the health impacts of exposure to mold has become increasingly clear. A 2011 review of the academic literature found consensus on the association between visible mold or mold odor or dampness or water damage and a wide range of respiratory allergic health effects, including asthma, bronchitis, and respiratory infections. Because mold is not explicitly referenced in state code, local enforcement agencies have been uncertain about their authority to address this common complaint, leading to widely inconsistent enforcement approaches to mold across the state. Code enforcement officers have made it clear that current law does not provide clarity when it comes to mold. The authors worked hard with advocates, code enforcement officers, and committee staff to create a clear definition of mold. And the authors' offices have also worked hard with the California Apartment Association on major amendments to the bill. And with these changes, the California Apartment Association has a neutral position on this bill. SB 655 would bring clarity to everyone, as well as protections both to tenants and landlords and owners to work to move California forward for healthier communities. And with that, I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chu. Mr. Gallagher, you're recognized.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, members, I rise in opposition to this bill. We actually saw this bill in Judiciary Committee. And one of the big issues here is that, the vast majority of mold out there is non-harmful. It has no effect on humans, has no negative effect on humans. However, in this bill, there's really no distinction made between harmful mold and non-harmful mold. It's as if there's a visible inspection of mold in a household, it can be that housing can then be labeled substandard. That's way too broad of a category. This needs to be much more specific. The other problem is that our code enforcement officers really do not really have the level of training to identify and make that distinction between harmful mold and non-harmful mold. And so I think to have a blanket and broad category that will label all housing substandard just on a visible observation of mold by someone who's not necessarily qualified to make a determination regarding mold, that is it's bad policy. It's going to cause a whole lot of problems. And I think this really should go back to the drawing board, and maybe we can focus in on really harmful mold and how we deal with that situation. There's also issues of how do you remediate? How do you remediate mold? How is somebody going to be able to come back and say, well, I've taken care of the problem? There's a lot of issues with this bill. I'd ask you to please consider opposing this bill. We need to go back to the drawing board on this, members. Thank you.
Mr. Chow, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this bill. There are numerous health impacts associated with mold, and as we heard earlier, mold is in fact a very common complaint of California tenants. I think the bill strikes a balance between the rights of the landlords and also tenants. For example, a mold that is minor and found on surfaces that could accumulate moisture as part of their normal use would not be considered a substandard condition. And additionally, landlords would not have an obligation to repair mold-related issues if they did not have notice of the problem, or if the mold was caused by the tenant's failure to maintain that premises. And I believe that AB 655 will create statewide consistency in the enforcement of mold complaints. For those reasons, I am supporting the bill. Thank you.
All debate having ceased on the item, Mr. David Chu, you may close.
Thank you. I want to just respond to some of the issues that were raised by our colleague across the aisle. First of all, the amendments that were adopted at the request of the California Apartment Association creates a clear definition of mold to bring clarity for code enforcement, states that a code enforcement officer needs to make a determination if the unit with mold is deemed to be a substandard living condition, clarifies that tenants must notify landlords either orally or in writing of a mold issue in order to make sure that there's proactive addressing of these issues. And it also allows a landlord to enter a unit to repair dilapidation related to the presence of mold. Also, with regards to the suggestion that health and code enforcement officers are not extensively trained, that's simply not true. They are extensively trained. And it is required that findings of substandard conditions with regards to this impact must be made defensible in a court should an owner challenge the findings. So that being said, it would be irresponsible for agencies to send untrained staff to make these substandard housing determinations because those findings would be easily dismissed when challenged in court. So with that, colleagues, I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Chu. With that, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Mr. Chu, what's your pleasure?
Track folks down. Move the call, please.
Mr. Chu moves a call. File item 101, pass and retain. We will pass and retain as well on file items 102 through 116. We are moving to file item 117, and that's SB 731. The clerk will read.
Senate Bill 731 by Senator Leno and others, enact relating to foster care.
Mr. Kansen Chu, you may open.
Thank you, Mr. Speakers and members. I rise today to present SB 731 by Senator Leno. SB 31 will require child welfare workers and caregivers to consider a child's gender identity when making decisions about foster care placement. Sadly, as we know from so many tragic stories, many transgender youths face rejection, bullying, and physical abuses at the hands of their family, community, and school due to bias against their gender identity or expression. These children are at extremely high risk for poor health and mental health. They are at much higher risk than other youths for homelessness, abuse, depression, and suicide. It is essential that we provide caregivers an environment that affirm and respect these young people so that they can thrive. This bill has no opposition and has received bipartisan support in both houses. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, the clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. The clerk will close the roll, tally the votes, ayes 46, no 0. Measure passes. We're going to pass and retain file items 118 and 119, file item 120, as well as file item 120. We're going to pass temporarily file item 121, pass and retain file item 122 and 123, and now go to file item 124 for purposes of amendments SB 282. The clerk will read.
Senate Bill 282 with amendments by Assemblymember Santiago.
Mr. Santiago, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. SB 282 is a follow-up to SB 866, which passed out of this House in 2001 and was signed into law. The proposed amendments align the prior authorization appeals process with federal regulations. I respectfully request that these amendments be adopted and that the bill go out to print and back on file. That's it.
Seeing and hearing no further debate, without objection, we can take a voice vote on these amendments. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. The bill is out to print and back on file. We're going to pass and retain file items 125 through 135. Going now to file item 136, SB 621. The clerk will read.